Hopefully this fixes our audio issues. Welcome back to the Wizards Lizard 2 game development live stream. I'm Geoff from Lost Decade Games, and we were having some audio issues previously, so hopefully we'll get that fixed. Let me know in the chat if you can hear or can't hear what I'm saying so that I can try and fix it. Anyways, I will pretend like things are going well. So, okay, sounds like we're good. Anyways, as I was explaining, I'm going to work a little bit on the positioning of Raga's tongue, that particular mechanic. And what I want to do basically is fix the layering issues that we had, which I don't think were extremely obvious before, but let's turn that down a little bit. The problem was before that, oops, now I got hit by a fireball. The tongue kind of exists like either above or below Raga's sprite, right? Because we just have a sprite for the tongue and a sprite for the lizard, and so one has to be above the other one. Melissa is photobombing my stream. Anyways, and so previously the tongue was always drawn completely underneath Raga, which is kind of a weird looking setup, especially when you're looking at it from the front or one of these angles. But now we have the tongue drawing on top of him, and you can kind of see like the various states of that's in. Like from the front, it actually doesn't look too bad right now because the anchoring of the tongue is kind of where his mouth is. Here I haven't done any work on the anchoring, so it looks like it's coming from his eyeball, which obviously looks wrong. And then here on the side, it's coming from his, outside of his face, which looks also wrong. Anyway, so what we're going to do, well, first we can look at these fireballs. This is a trap that Matt made over the week. We made these floating knives last time, although I added a little bit of purple lighting to them and stuff. And then Matt made these ovens that spit fireballs, and I wired those up during the week. So those are kind of cool. And so yeah, let's get into the tongue. So let's go into our debug scene for now. Yeah, so well, the anchor didn't change before. Basically, I had the tongue anchored at his center the whole time, which looked okay when it was completely underneath him. But again, it doesn't look that great coming from under his feet. So what I need to do now is fix the anchoring. And I tried fixing it by having a separate anchor game object, which then I use in the animator. So like here in his tongue right animation, you can see that this object is actually up here at the moment, which really shouldn't be. But yeah, basically we can position that tongue anchor where we want it to be. The only problem with that, though, is that the rest of the tongue is kind of a separate game object right now, which doesn't play as well with that as I want it to. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to refactor the tongue to work the way I want it to and anchor at the correct locations and all that good jazz. So let's get started. I think the first thing we're going to do basically is kind of separate the tongue into various pieces. It's already kind of separated into, like we were looking at just now, the anchor, which is going to be kind of like where it starts. The actual tongue itself, which is the collision part. So you can see here it's got a circle collider and a script that does all the heavy lifting there. And then it's got this sprite, and the sprite is a sub-object. And the reason that we use a sub-object for the sprite is because we're going to scale the sprite to look like it's extending from the origin to the tip. And we can't scale the base object because then it will affect the circle collider, I believe, and that's not really what we want. So that being said, we're going to do a little bit of refactoring. So we're going to keep this base object, but we really want to turn this base tongue object into the anchor, really is what we want. And I'm going to create a separate game object that will actually be the tip of the tongue. So let's do that, and we'll call this tip. And then this is the part where I think we'll have the collider. Let's see here. Let me just, oops, sorry. Let me move this whole tongue out so I can work on it independently. So let's take this collider off. And let's see. What we'll do is we'll add a circle collider 2D, and that's going to be much bigger than we want. About 2.5 is kind of what we're looking at. And this is the part that actually, this game object is going to be the one that's going to tween out from the base and register the collision events. And then basically what we'll do is we'll just provide some events, some custom events that will bubble back up to our tongue script. Is that a new hat? It is not. Well, it's relatively new. I got it, I think like in May or something. We went to the San Diego Zoo with Melissa's family, and I bought it there because, I don't know, I like tiger hats. So yeah. And it's easier to work with because it's just like a ball cap that kind of looks like a tiger. Although I've been wearing it on the stream for the past several weeks, so it's not that new.
I think they probably need new glasses.
And then I said, is that a new hat? These are new glasses, though. New specs. Alrighty, so the tip of the tongue, we're going to need a script for this guy. So let's go in here, and we're going to create a new script. C# script. And we're going to call this tongue tip. Tongue tip. And we'll open this up in Sublime Text. Handy dandy Sublime Text. And we actually already have a tongue script that's doing some of the stuff. Really, what it does is that it registers these collisions. So I think what we really want to do, basically, what I'd like to be able to do is really just listen to the collision event of the sub-object, but I don't really think that Unity has a way to do that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of fake it by putting a onTrigger enter 2D function here. Collider 2D, and then we're just going to bubble this up to the parent. Actually, we're just going to raise an event because that's what we're going to do. Was Raga inspired by any particular species of lizard? Not specifically. He's kind of he always kind of started out as like a lizard man. I think in his first incarnation he was meant to be more of a lizard man. Like the original inspiration was like a lizard man enemy from Shining Force, or like the lizard man character from Soul Calibur. But he kind of evolved over the course of getting the Lizard 1 done. So AG McLeod asks, he says he finds it interesting that I use Sublime instead of MonoDev and Visual Studio, given that you get IntelliSense and compiler errors. That's true. The compiler errors, I mean, you actually get in Unity if you go into the console. So, I mean, from that perspective, it's pretty easy. And when you wire up Sublime to Unity, like I can just click on these compiler errors and jump straight to the line where the errors are happening. So from that perspective, it's fine. And I do get a little bit of IntelliSense. Actually, I just installed a package that one of our viewers recommended called OmniSharp, which is supposed to give us better IntelliSense. But Sublime Text does actually have support for that kind of stuff, autocomplete and stuff. Yeah, his little frill thing, Raga's frill thing, was kind of inspired by the dinosaur from Jurassic Park, I assume. Anyways, what we're going to do is we're going to define an event here, and I like to prefix my events with the name of the class because they end up being public delegates. So actually, in this case, I need to make this a delegate, not a void. Delegate, and we'll call it tongue tip collide. Or maybe call it enter, just to be more consistent with the Unity naming convention. Anyways, and this is going to have a collider 2D as the parameter. And what we're going to do is here say if, oh actually, and then in the class itself we need to declare an event, public event, and it's going to be a tongue tip enter event, which we're going to call on enter. Let's just call it on trigger enter. So I remember what I'm talking about. And then trigger enter. And then here we'll say if on trigger enter not equal to null, then we will just call this event with the collider. Great. So really what we're doing is just kind of proxying this event that's happening on this little sub-object up into the parent object. So A.G. McLeod talking more about MonoDev versus Visual Studio. Yeah, I mean Visual Studio is probably a much more powerful editor, but you know, I happen to like Sublime Text a lot. So and I am not a big fan of the really big monolithic editors like Visual Studio, or I don't even know, MonoDevelop even. I really like just like glorified text editors. Basically, it kind of suits my style more so than having like all these crazy windows. Which is weird because, you know, Unity is like that kind of an IDE, right, where you've got like all these things and there's various windows and tabs and all this stuff, which, you know, I'm more okay with recently, but I do prefer to write my code in kind of very minimal environment. Who knows? You know, I eventually moved away from web development, which was, you know, more straightforward in some ways, to Unity, so I may make the jump to a better IDE at some point. Who knows? Who knows? Anyways, so what we're going to do here is we're going to need a reference in here to the tip. So we're going to give this a game object, and we're going to call it tip, and then in here, we're just going to, no, we're going to look at our parsing errors, and maybe we need a return type here. Maybe. There we go. So then we're just going to drag the tip to here, so we have a reference to it, and eventually we're actually going to get rid of this tongue anchor. In fact, let's get rid of it right now. Delete that. And then we're also going to delete this anchor reference, because essentially what's going to happen here is that the tongue, this root game object here, is going to become the anchor. And then the tip will then tween out from the anchor, and then the sprite will stretch in between the two, is kind of where we're going with this, just to kind of give you a long view of what's going on, because it might take several steps to get there, but that's going to be the end result. And again, the separate game objects here actually kind of work better than not, because of like the scaling and stuff. So this is looking good. The sprite, you know, is all set up. We really don't need to mess much with this, because this is really just already kind of a dumb object that just gets stretched between the two things. Although we could make the sprite a child of the tip, and that way we wouldn't have to mess with its origin. Although, I don't know, we'll see. We already have a reference to the sprite here, so we'll just keep that. So we've got the tip and our sprite as sub-objects. And then what we want to do is in our init, basically, we want to listen to some events on the tip. And I don't think we actually need to keep a reference to this, but what we're going to do is say tongue tip. Oh, we already have a variable called tip, so we're going to say tongue tip. We'll just call it tongue tip, and this is going to be the script. It's going to be tip dot get component, and it's going to be the tongue tip script. And then on the tongue tip script, we're going to listen to, it's going to be on trigger enter. We're going to say plus equals on tongue tip trigger enter. I tend to be more verbose than I need to be sometimes. And we're going to make this a private function, which I generally tend to put down near the end of a class. I like to keep my public and private functions in the same place. On tongue tip trigger enter, and this is going to be collider 2D collider. So really, this is a almost the exact same function as we had up here, and so hopefully we can just copy and paste the contents of that function into here, and it will just work the same way. Although we still need to do a little bit more finagling to get some of this other stuff working the way we want, just because there's different objects involved here. And then we'll get rid of that. Let's see. So the late update is where the sprite is actually getting scaled. So that's probably all fine. I think what we want to do though here is also make sure that so we don't have the anchor anymore. So the origin is now going to be the transform of the root. So it's really just going to be transform. No, sorry, not the. It's going to be the transform of the tip is going to be the start. So we'll say tip.transform.position.x and tip.transform.position.y. And then the difference between those, the distance, sorry, between those two vectors scaled over the width of the sprite is going to give us the scale at which we want to scale the sprite itself. Dan Nagel asks, have you ever considered dropping some C# into your GitHub? Actually, I have, and I'm sure that I will. In fact, I've already started to kind of work on this project in terms of like modularity, and so I have some stuff that's been abstracted that I think would make decent open source stuff, just like kind of like this little random library that all it does is kind of give you some sugar around choosing items randomly from like a generic list or shuffling stuff. This just uses like the Fisher-Yates shuffle algorithm for shuffling a list in place. And then again, it gives you like sugar around like a chance. So you could say, random.chance 0.5, which would be like 50%. Excuse me. Which, is not completely necessary because, it's a pretty easy thing to write anyway. But that's the kind of stuff that I would consider putting up there at some point. Also got this dungeon generator code that might also be a good candidate just because it's a little bit separate and it's actually not even Unity specific. I've written it to be as generic as possible because really all it is data manipulation. It's just a bunch of data structures that I use the algorithms to generate data that defines how a dungeon is going to be laid out, which rooms connect to which, how big they are, how big the entire dungeon could be, etc., etc. So, I have a cat that wants up on my lap. Hi, cat. Maybe it's cat dinner time. Okay, so back to the tongue. Hey, Salmon Moose, thanks for dropping by. All right, so the scaling of this thing should be okay for now. We don't want this, so when we reset, we actually want to take the transform of the tip and change the local position to be not vector 0, but the location of the anchor. Although, I think actually what we want to do, actually no, that should be fine. Yeah, should be fine. We'll probably have to work on that. Show us the cat. Actually, the cat went away for now. So when she comes back, we'll try and pick her up and see if she's going to be able to be picked up. That's my skittish cat, so she doesn't usually like to be manhandled. Okay, so what we're going to do... Oh, here she comes. Come here, cat. Oh, hi, kitty. No. Nope. She wants to run away. Well, she meowed. There you go. She wanted to sit on my lap, but come here. No, come on. Come say hi to the nice stream visitors. Cat can be picked up false. Yes. Cat, you're distracting everybody from Unity code. And me. Come here. Oh, there we go. I got a cat. There she is. Oh, no. No, you don't get picked up. Yeah, she gives me kisses. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the kisses. You want down now? Okay. That one doesn't like to be held. Yeah, we don't have to terrorize her too much. Now I got cat hair all over myself. Ugh. Okay. All right, back to the task at hand. This is why I don't get enough work done. Because cats. That's it.
Don't blame it on the cat.
If a Wizard's Lizard 2 gets delayed, you all know who to blame. It's the cats. Okay, for real this time. Let's see. Now, we don't want to... Actually, we could deactivate this game object when we do the extend, which we probably want to do because that'll just kind of turn off everything in the hierarchy. Let's see. But here is where we are figuring out the angle. So when we call this extend function externally from the player controller, this is the angle at which the tongue wants to extend. And so what we do here is we get a vector which represents the angle of the extension times the extend distance. So the extend distance is defined up here as a public variable, which is going to be in Unity unit. So right now it's like 4. And since one Unity unit is 1 tile in the game, it's going to be 4 tiles. So it's a pretty concrete way to control how far the tongue moves. Still cat hair flying everywhere. And then what we do is we add the vector to the current position, but this is the world position. So I think what we want to do is actually we want to add this vector to the local position, and then we want to use the move local function. If that makes sense. So what we want to do is we want to say, I wonder actually if what we could do is just say vector 3, so vector 3 plus equals the transform local position. Maybe. We'll see. Let's just comment this out for now because maybe that's not right. And then we want to move the game object from where it currently is, which should be well, let's make this the local position is going to be, actually, yeah, so I think this was vector 3.0. So we want to set the local position back to the center of the parent object, because this is the tip of the tongue we're talking about. Hello. Telk Andor wants to buy a license to play the game. Well, you can. You can buy it on Steam. Well, you can buy the Wizards Lizard 1 license on Steam. And then soon, when we kickstart this game, you can back it on Kickstarter, which we will be announcing very soon in the near future. The other thing is that we want to make this a local tween. We want to operate on the local position, not the world position. And again, we're going to keep our easing the same. And then once the ease is complete, we're going to fire an event. Really, we're going to handle the event that gets thrown on complete of the tween. And then we handle the return of the tongue. And then all we do is we change the rotation of the tongue itself to match the angle that it's being fired at. So let's see if this actually works or if it's completely broken, and then we'll go from there. All right, so we don't have the origin anymore. So this is actually going to be now the transform of the root game object, which we are in. So we don't need that anymore. And yeah, that seems to clear up the error. So let's see how broken it is. Fairly broken. Woo! Whoop. Okay, a couple things going on here. One is the tip actually needs to be a trigger, so it doesn't actually collide with the walls. And let's see. Obviously, we need to. Oop, there we go. So the stretching is not working anymore, but it does seem to be going about the right amount of distance, like 4 tiles. Hi, cat. Cat's back. And let's see. So the scaling is not working, but the angle is working, so that's good. So for some reason, let's see what the distance is here. Let's do a little bit of debug.log distance. No? Object reference not set to an instance of an object. Are you sure? Oh, yes. We forgot to add our tongue tip script to the tongue tip itself. That might help a little bit. I did try the line renderer. The line renderer uses materials, and I actually did. I tried to implement that way first, and I just didn't like the way that it worked out. And so it is multiple objects, though. You can actually see right now the tongue is like the tip is going to be its own thing right now, and then the sprite is kind of something that gets stretched in between the two. So yeah. The line renderer is kind of better for things where, you know, it could even bend, you know, because it ended up being just one. You know, I don't want a line render. You know, line render can do stuff where it like kind of segments around. I think the line render would be really great for like a chain, where each link could be a section of line. But it didn't seem to work out that well for just something that was going to be a singular length or singular segment. And the actual the scaling of the sprite works really well because it looks kind of the way I want, and it's actually very simple. It's probably broken right now just because I'm refactoring code and I haven't actually gotten it to be where I want. Oh yeah, it would be kind of cool if the tongue could bend, I guess. It would also be cool if it was like visible on the screen at all right now. So let's first move that guy back there. At the origin. Yeah, so Dan Nagel and Matt are talking about skin shedding in the game. We've actually been brainstorming a lot of really cool lizard type abilities that they're probably gonna make their way into this game. You know, obviously the tongue is something kind of reptilian and lizardy, but there's also like skin shedding. There's lizards that can walk on water. There's lizards that can camouflage themselves. There's lizards that can squirt blood out of their eyes. Like there's all kinds of weird crap that lizards can do. That would be really fun. So let's see. Let's clear this out. 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. Oh, I think I know what the problem is. Transform. We probably want this to be the local position of X, or the tip. Right? Right. Maybe. We'll see. Local position. Whoa! Oh man, I love bugs so much. Well, the distance is working correctly, but as you can see, this is a pretty scary looking setup here. Let's see. So the tongue's position itself in the world ends up being like pretty crazy out there. Oh, I know what the problem is. I know what one of the problems are. We are actually tweening the root game object, not the tip, which is what we want to do. We want to tween the tip just out and back. So let's try that and see. Nope. Still broken. So tongue, so this isn't tweening anywhere, which is what we want. And then the sprite itself, scaling. A little bit too crazily. Let's see. Yeah, shooting rainbows out of his eyes would be kind of cool. Another thing that Matt thought up was like a heat rock. You know, lizards are cold-blooded, and so there could be some kind of heat mechanic where, you know, you have to heal or you get a buff if you go in on a heat rock or something. Anyways, let's see if we can't figure out what's happening here. So something is going a little wonky with this. Can we turn on the gizmos? So let's turn on the gizmos and let's highlight the tip here and then see if we can see this collider moving in. So the collider is actually going in the right place. It does look like the base position is wrong because the actual collider is doing what it's supposed to, right? Because you can see it, that green thing moving. I think part of it's actually because I haven't updated this return function yet. Because what's going to happen? Yeah, okay, I see what's happening. Because it's moving, right. So we're going to leave grappling alone for a second because we're not doing that. And this is the generic return right here. And we actually want to tween local and then tween the tip itself back to not the parent transform anymore, but the just transformed position, which is the root object here. And then we're scaling the return duration based on how far out the tongue actually went. Oh, that'd be kind of funny. I like Ragai's suggestion. Woo! Okay. Really interesting there. Okay. It's interesting because the... Oh, I know. It's okay. So we're going to tween, let's see. This is the distance scale, which is probably the problem. So we want to take the distance that the tip is at. So this is going to be tip.transform. It's always easier to write this code the first time sometimes because you kind of build from the ground up with just the bare bone pieces in place. Like start with like, okay, now here's the collider and whatever else. But coming back to refactor it is a lot more difficult. But it shouldn't be too bad. Anyways, and so we want to distance that from the transform, and then I think actually what we want to do is just keep using local positions here because these are all going to be based on relative positioning to the parent. And we're using move local, so let's see if that'll work. See, oh no. Really? Game object. Oh, right. Right. Wow, I'm just making all kinds of mistakes here. All right. No, it's still getting all kinds of crazy. Let's not scale. Let's see, move local. We're going to move this game object. And we're going to move it to transform.position. I think what we want here is actually local position again. I think that's why this is kind of going nuts on us. Ooh. Well, the sprite doesn't work quite yet, but now the collider is actually doing the right thing, right? It's going out. We step on a tile kind of in the center. We can see it goes to the fourth tile out, which is what we want. And then it kind of just comes back. So it kind of looks like he's just spitting a little ball. Woo, except for it's kind of wacky. Oh. Let's see what we can do here. Part of it could be the fact that we're rotating. I think what we actually want to do is rotate just the sprite itself. I think that's what's causing the problem here, because before we were kind of moving the entire object, and so the rotation actually worked, but here we don't want that. There we go. So the scaling is actually still wrong, but now we can see that the actual movement of the collider is doing what we want it to do. Just moving in all the correct directions, and it's hitting the wall and coming back. And also it's just stopping at the right spot. So now we need to figure out why the visualization of the sprite isn't working, which we'll do. So luckily this is a pretty small function here, and so what we're doing, okay, I see the problem is, we need to take the local position once again here instead of regular position. So really a lot of this refactor is just going to be going through and using local position instead of the world position. So maybe that will work. Almost. It's actually close. It's scaling the right way. It's just not anchored in the right position. So it's kind of always behind him. So it looks kind of funny, but with a small tweak, we should be able to make that work the way we want. So we want to transform local scale. Then we also want to do is we also want to take the sprite and we want to set its transform local position equal to the local position of the tip. So tip transform.local position. Because the way that it works is that the tongue sprite it'll make the tongue sprite do what it's supposed to do. Here. There we go. Yeah. That looks a lot better. Nice. Salmon Moose makes a good point. Says that I may want 2 colliders in there, one for grabbing. If you made the grab slightly larger, it'll feel less finicky. That's absolutely true. The grabbing and the grappling could probably benefit from a larger collider. And then the smaller collider could just be something that's used for, like, you know, walls and junk. But that's, you know, it's getting better. It's getting better. I like how we have to, you know, break stuff down before we make progress. So refactoring is all about. It's got to get worse before it gets better. Dan Nagel asks if I ever think of just tossing in some neat 3D effects simply because Unity supports it. Yeah, it's hard not to. I mean, the lights in Unity are actually like 3D point lights, and so they act kind of weird and funny because they're 3D. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to go into like basically the 3D mode and like look around. Although it's not as interesting here, but if we were to run the game and then go back to the scene, this kind of stuff is fun. You can like see these things moving around in 3D space. It's kind of fun. Where's our tile? There it is. Let's turn off the gizmos though. No? The lights out there. There we go. Anyways, it's pretty fun to kind of watch this stuff. I think that 3D effects would be really cool for like some spells or that kind of thing. I have seen a lot of games that do like they'll use 3D geometry, like, you know, like a 3D level, and then they'll keep a fixed camera, so it kind of looks like a 2D overhead game, but all the underlying geometry is actually in 3D, which actually I think is a really cool approach, and it works really well. There's been some issues with, like, especially lighting these just 2D planes that are just sprites, really. So it's kind of interesting stuff. Anyways, the short answer is yes. The long answer is yes, plus all that explanation. Something else that that Sprite Tile actually supports is what's called the Mode 7 camera, which is the best example I can think of is like Super Mario Kart, where you've kind of got this like 2D tile map plane that kind of looks like it's angled away from the camera. It's got perspective to it, and then you have sprites sitting on top of it, right? And then in Mario Kart, you know, the world just kind of rotates around the player. That's interesting. I think that Dan actually liked this a lot. That is a perspective we would consider for like a tactical game, like a Lava Blade type deal, right? Where you have like this Mode 7 camera and you've got sprites kind of moving around this like perspective tile map. Could be pretty fun. Okay. The nice thing about this setup too is that Salmon Moose's suggestion of adding a second collider to make the like grappling and the item pickup less finicky would actually be pretty easy in this setup too, because we could just add a second game object with a different collider and have it collide with different things, like whatever we wanted to, like the collectibles or whatever, and have that be a larger collider. And so we might work on that as part of this refactor too. So we've got the basic idea working now, which is that we've separated the tongue into a few different game objects, and we've also like condensed them into one. So instead of having like 2 game objects that were related to the tongue sitting right here at the first level underneath the player, now they're kind of condensed into one. And so basically what we can do is just manipulate them more easily. So I think the next thing I want to do actually is relink this prefab, and then I want to go into this other scene over here where we just have Raga. Hopefully, no, gotta delete some stuff here. There we go. And then we'll revert him to the newest version, and we're also going to disable the light on him for now because the scene is well lit. There we go. And this is going to allow us a little bit better view of exactly where the tongue is layering on the character. Because this is actually what I wanted to get to, was the point where we're going to figure out how to make this tongue look good against all these different directions and sprites and stuff. So let's get to that. So the basic idea here is that for each of these animations, we're going to set the anchor position correctly, and so we're going to remove that. And let's see, so the tongue here, and what we're going to do here is we're going to hit the record button, and we're going to move the position of this tongue to where we want it to be. And so we're just going to go down, kind of like put it right at his mouth in this frame. And the reason I like this is because it's a very visual way to just position the thing right where we want it to be. And then, you know, this collider is going to shoot out. Let's see. So, and then we'll stop that. Nope. That's not exactly what I wanted. Unless the scaling is just off for that. Let's see. 0.35 for the tongue itself. I thought that was kind of what we wanted. Let's see. So I wonder why that's not working the way I want it to. So the tongue itself, oops. Once we hit that, it should go to 0.35. That's where the collider should start, which it is. Have you ever thought about using something like 3JS or Babylon? Yeah, I mean, 3JS, is really just a 3D library for WebGL. I mean, it doesn't. It's cool and it does a lot of cool stuff, but it's not a game engine, right? Babylon, I guess, is a game engine, and I didn't really think about it too heavily because honestly, the whole HTML5 packaging performance stuff is kind of just not a direction I'm really interested in right now. The WebGL performance is probably pretty good, but the whole ecosystem is really difficult to work with, I guess, is my biggest problem. It's like you've got, Babylon.js, which would be a dependency, which, is probably a decent product. I haven't actually used it, so, take it with a grain of salt. But then you're going to have to deploy it for desktop somehow, like Node WebKit. And Node WebKit, again, is a pretty decent project, but, it has these dependencies, right? Like it ships with a certain version of Chromium, and it ships with a certain version of Node.js. And then you've got things like Greenworks, which is a Node.js lib written for integrating with Steamworks, and that has a version of Node.js that it depends on. And all those things in conjunction get really, really difficult to manage, right? You've got your JavaScript engine, which could be Babylon or custom or Impact, or it doesn't really matter what it is. Then you've got Node.js or Atom shell. Then you've got things like Greenworks, and you've got the version of Chromium and the version of Node that all need to play together nicely. And like honestly, that ecosystem is not big enough yet, I think, to have like solved those problems. And all of these solutions come from disparate places that don't always, they aren't always in lockstep. So I mean, that's kind of a really difficult position to be in as a developer because all of these pieces that you depend on can update out of sync. Um, and obviously those kinds of problems can be an issue with like Unity or whatever as well. But I'm more interested in game development solutions right now that allow me to, you know, abstract away all of those details about trying to put together this application that we can deploy. Uh, so yeah. Yeah, Dan Nagel makes a good point. The Unity output of WebGL is extremely bloated. Again, part of our decision-making process when it comes to this stuff is that the web browser is not actually one of our primary targets. I mean, I like the web and I like writing JavaScript and I like the whole ecosystem of the web, but that's not where the money is for game development right now. I mean, and maybe it is in the future, and maybe we'll be able to pivot to that at some point. But right now, all of our sales are on Steam, and so Steam wants native Windows primarily. Again, the large share of where we make money is on Windows, and so for us, like from a business perspective, it's Windows native desktop app. Those are like the key points, and so that is not something that is easy or efficient with HTML5. It's kind of the long-winded answer to that. Hopefully it was informative though. But it basically comes down to like what are our goals and what are the best way to achieve those goals with the least amount of friction and the most amount of efficiency with having only 2 developers and being a small team and stuff. So yeah, that's how that goes. All right, so let's get back into this stuff. I think I've stalled long enough trying to figure out this anchoring issue. So as you can see, it looks fine almost any time when it's completely under him. So it's really just these front frames we have to worry about. So let's tweak the side Raga tongue right. And we'll remove that. And then we'll go in here and let's take a look at where we want this guy to be. Probably here. And maybe down there. Maybe just like a hair back that way for now. And we'll test that. Interesting. So same issue here where it looks like the scaling of the sprite's not actually doing what we want it to do. So we're taking maybe I want to swap these. I don't know, the local position of the tip and getting the distance of those. Salmon Moose makes a good point. Plus, like, we're kind of a remote shop anyway. Like, Matt and I actually hardly ever get together anymore. Maybe like once every couple months. We were thinking about doing every other month, but life happens. Okay, so we've got these 2 vectors, which is the position of the tip and then the position of the anchor. And what we're doing is we're trying to scale the sprite from the position of the tip to the position of the anchor. And it looks like it's just a little bit short. And we can go in and we can look and make sure that the sprite is actually what we think it is. maybe it didn't change. So the tongue is here. Let's see. We could actually just bring that in a tad. So this looks about right. Looks like about where we want that sprite to be. Although, no, actually, yeah, that's how we want it. We probably want to offset that collider though just a little bit, but that isn't the current problem. What we do want to do though is we want to maybe just offset that collider like a little bit like that, just for the purposes of collision. Seems that it kind of like drifts downwards too, although I can't tell if that's true. Yeah, it looks like it does. So the tongue itself, the interesting thing is it seems to be constant at that location. So people are talking about the pricing of games in Australia. It's interesting because I think that a lot of people just kind of like go with Steam's pricing. I don't know about 2K games, to be honest, but I'm sure that a lot of indie games just kind of take Steam's pricing suggestions. You could go through every locale and set the price yourself, I think, if you wanted to, but honestly, I don't know enough about the currency exchange rates in all those different locations to really have a good idea of what the price should be. I think that there's been a couple occasions where people have bubbled up to us that they thought the pricing was incorrect. Oh, if it's $10 US, the Steam conversion is something else in the euro, but I don't know. It takes a lot of investigation to figure out what the prices should be for all those different locales, perhaps. Okay, let's see. I wonder what would happen if we did this the opposite way. If we set the local position to be this and scaled it the other way. I think it would scale the other direction though is what would happen. So, but I guess what we could do is we could scale it -x. Well, let's just see what that looks like first. Yeah, okay. But see, it's still wrong. Still way too far out. Now, why is that? Must be like some discrepancy between where the tongue ends up. Oops. I don't think it's actually in this scaling logic. So let's see. Let's go back into the animation, and let's see, it's going to the right. So theoretically, like, I feel like that should be where we want the anchor to be. Because if we were to go back to 0, 0 for this anchor, yeah, so that's correct. But the second we start moving it, so let's go like x of 1. Oops, not there. I want to hit record first, and then let's put it to x of 1, which is like way out there, obviously. Oops. Excuse me. Let's see here. So it sets the local position to 0 of the tip, which is what we want. And then it resets. We take the vector of the angle that we want to shoot the tongue, and we add the local position to that, which we actually don't really need to do, I think, because it's already at 0, 0, and so what we really just need to do is do that. That's not the problem, but that's a little unnecessary. We're rotating the sprite itself, but that should be fine. We were already doing that before. The only thing I can think of is that it doesn't start. This is actually the problem I was trying to correct in the first place, is that the animation doesn't start. When this tongue tween starts happening, the animation really hasn't kicked in yet. I mean, it looks instantaneous to us, but maybe we can slow this down a little bit and see, like, if we make this like 2.5 seconds, because it looks like there's something funky going on here. Woo, right. So it's not the transform of the tongue itself. Maybe it's something to do with the sprite. Oh, the sprite has a wonky position. Let's see. Oops. I wonder why that is. I wonder if maybe the problem is just that we had a wacky... No, so that should be 0. So sprite starts at 0, tweens out. That should end up being 0, I would think. Let's see. Well, the tongue is 2 parts. I mean, unless you're talking about breaking the sprite into 2 parts, but that's not really going to help with the problem I'm having right now, right? Because even if it were 2 parts, we'd still want to be stretching this, the length of the tongue in between the 2 vectors, and that is what is being problematic at the moment. I think what I need to do is reset the tongue sprite as well, perhaps. I think that could be one of the problematic things. So maybe during this reset portion, we should also say sprite transform dot local position is equal to vector 3.0, and then maybe we should also say sprite dot transform dot rotation is equal to the identity. Foxy Runs says, I have no idea what's going on, but I like the lizard. Thanks. To give you a brief idea what's going on, I am refactoring the lizard tongue mechanic, and it is not working out the way I want right now. So we're trying to fix that. So the tip goes to 1, which makes sense. Let's see. So reset those local positions to 0. And then during this tween, we're taking the local position, which should be 1. We're tweening it back. Loco for Loki. Hey, thanks for joining. You get to watch me struggle with the tongue visualization, which was working correctly before, but now that I refactored it, it kind of isn't doing what I want it to do anymore, which is always a little bit frustrating. But I think we can fix it. Just need to figure out what we need to do here. That's true. We could try the line renderer again. For some reason, I didn't like the way the materials worked. I really wish that the line renderer would just use sprites, or there was a sprite line renderer, because I don't want to have to use materials, because they don't seem to do what I want half the time. I think there was some other reason I was not using the line renderer. I did try it, actually. I took your suggestion, several streams ago. This was actually like, well, I don't know how many streams ago this was, but I did try it, and I don't remember exactly what I didn't like about it. I'm trying to remember now. Salmon Moose says there is a sprite material. Well, yeah. I mean, there's like a shader, right, for sprites. It's like you'd create a material here, and you could use the sprite shader for it. Is that what we're talking about? Except for that, doesn't, like, you can't use a sprite there. I think that was part of the problem with this stuff, is that, like, how do I mean, this is obviously like part of my problem with Unity, is that I don't know how some of these things work. But like, if I were to make a default sprite, for example, here, I can't choose a texture for this. Or can I just like drag and drop the tongue? Oh wait, I guess I have to lock my thing. So if I go to materials and new material, lock that inspector, and then Raga tongue. Yeah, I can't. I don't know why it won't let me do that. Excuse me. I think, though, that the issue, like, I mean, the line renderer might be better in this particular case, but something else is going on here, because it's perfectly capable of scaling between two vectors, right? Like, you can scale the image, and that was working before. So something else is going on that's creating this offset, right? Dan Nagel, thanks for coming. Always appreciate it. Excuse me. I will take a look at your Poker Kingdom stuff, Salmon Moose. I think that you've linked that to me before, but if you put it in chat, I actually have chat up on my my browser here, so I can actually take a look at it. I'll have to take some time to do that offline. I don't doubt that it's very possible with the sprite or the line renderer, but I feel like this should be working, and it makes me upset that it doesn't. Because I feel like it's a very simple equation here, right? Like, you have the local position of the tip, you have the local position of the root object, and stretching the sprite between the two is pretty simple, right? And this equation actually worked before. If we were to revert back to the version I started before this stream, it would be working perfectly. But there would be some other problems, obviously. Oh, it says it's a private project. My GitHub account is Geoff B, Geoff. Well, I will definitely take a look at your implementation of the line renderer and see if I can apply it to what I'm doing here. My only other concern with that is that does the lighting interact the same way with that material as it would with the rest of the sprites? Like, is it going to be problematic to have the tip be a sprite renderer and have the length of the tongue be a line renderer, et cetera, et cetera? Maybe not. Maybe it's all fine. I think what I'm going to do, though, just for a little bit of debugging here, is I'm going to actually attach a, check this. I'm going to actually attach a sprite renderer to the base so I can see where it's actually being positioned. So something small and round would probably be the best. Maybe one of these little guys right here. So that should be like, yeah. So the problem that I'm trying to figure out right now is actually completely independent of the scaling issue. Maybe not completely independent, but you know, we can see that that ball, what I wanted to do is I want that ball to be in his mouth, and it is not. So if we go back here and we hit record, so I put it at 1. So let's see, if we were to like move that and then move the Y down. That's kind of where we want it to be, right? So that's in the spot where we want it to be, and it's not moving, which is good. So every update, we find the position of the root object and the local position of the tip, which is being tweened. The local let's look at the let's look at what the actual scale is we're getting here. Debug.log. What if it has to do with the fact that we're actually like setting the local position? I don't think it should. Salmon Moose says, there you go, Geoff, don't make a cheap clone. Cheap clone of what? Let's see. Poker Kingdoms. Oh, don't make a cheap clone of your GitHub project. Gotcha. I would buy this game if it was on Steam. There you go. Cool. Let's see. I wonder if I'm even logged in. Foxy Run says, how did you learn to make games? It was just a long time of learning and wanting to make games. I started programming in QBasic when I was, I don't know, middle school-ish, high school-ish age. And I just always wanted to make games, I think. I like playing games, and, you know, I always was interested in how they were made, and I wanted to make my own. But, you know, back in those days, it was a lot harder to make games, at least for me. And so I found web development, which for me, whatever reason, clicked more easily than, things like C++, and so I started going down that path. But I always wanted to make games. I always messed around with like DirectX and stuff and C Sharp in my off time. And then games became possible in the browser, in like 2000, late 2000s probably. So I started doing that in JavaScript, and then that kind of rest of that is history. Matt and I have been making games in JavaScript for quite a number of years now, and we recently just kind of made the jump to Unity. And so a lot of my game development experience is, the culmination of that, all that experience leading up to where we are now. Unfortunately, it's not really a good answer, but it's just, or I would say it's not a good answer, but the way to make games is just to learn as much as you can. It takes a long time to understand all the various facets of programming. You just need to read a lot. You need to try a lot. You need to just kind of have that kind of curiosity where you can just fiddle with stuff until it makes sense. Yeah. Oh, modding is another great way, actually. I started out doing some stuff like similar to that. I started making Counter-Strike maps at one point, which really kind of gets you into the idea of how some of these games are made from a content perspective, which kind of helps. So I'm going to work on this a little bit more, the sprite renderer stuff. I will definitely take a look at your stuff, Salmon Moose. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate all the input on this stuff. I will give line renderer another shot. But I am also very stubborn, and I had this working the way I wanted it to before, and I screwed it up during the refactor somehow, and so I owe it to myself to figure out why. Because I'm crazy. About Notepad, though, I think that when I first started doing web development back in like the Mosaic/Netscape days, I remember I wrote all my HTML in Notepad, and it's kind of unthinkable today. Oh, that sounds really terrible. Very terrible indeed. Salmon Moose really wants to see the bendy tongue. I think the bendy tongue is a cool idea, but right now, from a game mechanic perspective, like I don't really have that in my head. Like the bendy tongue looks very cool visually, probably, but I don't know that it's exactly. Mechanically, I don't have a good vision for what that would be like in the game. Because with a bendy tongue, you're thinking like, okay, it could go around corners or something like that, and that has a lot of game design implications that my poor brain is not ready to handle yet. Not that I'm saying it won't ever happen, but So let's see. So we set the local positions to 0, which is where they should be. And then we tween the local positions. My mouse is getting kind of crappy. There we go. We tween. The tween is working correctly. And actually, I think that it does look like the problem is something with the scaling, because when I put that ball sprite in there and I moved the kind of anchor back where it was supposed to be. I wonder if I can. Let's change this sprite render to be a higher layer so we can actually see it. There we go. So that ball kind of shows us like where the tongue sprite should be anchoring. And the fact it's not means that my math is incorrect. Or something about the positioning is incorrect. But I don't think so. It's not the root object, because we ruled that out by putting the sprite on it. It's not the tip, because we could see that working correctly before. But let's put a sprite renderer on it just to debug it as well. So we'll make that this guy, and then we'll also make that on a high rendering layer. Woo! So that looks good from a perspective of where the tongue is being scaled from. It just doesn't look right from where it's scaled to. I'm going to blame my upgrade to Windows 10 for all these problems. Let's see. The sprite width is something we're getting on the onset, which should be fine, I think. Let's just debug log that just to be sure. Debug log sprite width. .9 Unity units. Okay. And then let's debug log this distance. Point 2 point. So the distance actually gets smaller at first. I think that might be kind of part of the issue here. Yeah, debug line, that's a good idea. So what is that? Debug dot draw line, and then is it just? I think it's just like vector A to vector B, and then it's like color dot yellow, for example. All right, we'll try that and see. I always forgot debug draw line. I even talked about it on a stream a while ago. Well, let's take the sprite out of the equation for the moment. Oh, excuse me. Something caught my mouse. It wasn't working. No? Why? I know I'm using debug drawline somewhere else. Yeah, that's part of the problem. Although I think the debug drawline has to be in world space, so that's probably the issue here. It's probably drawing it like way off the screen. So let's see. I wonder if I could just say, well, for the purpose of this, we'll just say vector a dot x plus equals transform dot position dot x. Yeah. Or s, can I just do this? Yes. Plus equals transform dot position. Oh. Let's see. Oh, because it's a vector 2 and a vector 3. Yeah, so I guess I guess all I'm gonna do is just do it this way. I'll do it the old-fashioned hard way, just to get it done. Vector b.x, position.x, and then y and position y. Unless there's a better way. Just add the transform position in the call. Oh, in here? In the drawline call? Will that actually work? Because if you can't add... Oh. So we're gonna... let's see. Plus transform position. This could really be highlighting what the problem actually is. No. Yeah. Well, I think that Doesn't debug drawline have to be vector 2s, or does it take vector 3 as well? Debug drawline, let's see. Maybe it does take vector 3. Oh, it does. It takes vector 3s. But I guess there's an override that takes vector 2s, because I'm giving it vector 2s and it seems to be fine, unless that maybe is the issue. Maybe the fact that I'm giving it vector 2s is part of the problem. So I guess what we could do is, you know, we could actually just use vector 3 for this anyway. Maybe I should just kind of like take another stab at this using vector 3s, because that would actually be a lot easier, right? Because what we could do is just say float distance is equal to vector 3 dot distance, because both these are going to be on 0. But we convert to vector 3 as 0z. Both we can, yeah, I see. So does Unity auto convert those vector 2s? Vector 3 dot distance, and this will be tip dot transform dot position, and then this will be local position, and this will be tip dot transform dot local position. That should be the distance. Okay, and then actually maybe before we even do any of this stuff, we'll just do the debug draw line between tip dot transform dot, well, it won't be local position, it'll be position and transform dot position. Yeah. Really, the only thing I'm using this for is to get a scaling factor. No? Debug.dryline like hates me today. Oh, I need to give it a color. Jesus. Sam Moose says, who, me? Oh, asking if he's the guy from the LDG forums. Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that we have one of the most entertaining game dev podcasts. Hopefully it's because of our witty banter. So let's try this. During late updates, we're just going to debug.drawline from transform.position in the world to... Oh, you don't see gizmos. Oh, do I have to have gizmos on? Jesus. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That probably saved me a bunch of... Excuse me. There we go. Okay. Yes. We have drawline. Okay. Gizmos, gizmos, gizmos. Here we go. Okay. I always got to remember that the debug stuff doesn't draw unless the gizmos are on. This also kind of highlights another weird issue, whereas you can see like this thing is kind of dropping. But I think that's a different problem. So it's drawing from the center of the two balls, which is what we want. So that's good. And then really, maybe what we can do is just say distance. Maybe we don't even need local position. Position, local position, because really all we want is just that number. We just really want that distance between the two. And then we want to get the scale of that distance over the sprite's width, and then set the scale and the local position. That should all be fine. Okay. It would be nice, actually, if this works, because then it would just... Oh, I should probably turn the sprite back on. It would actually simplify this function a lot. Hey, I think that's working. So I wonder what the issue happened to be. So we turn off gizmos. let's also turn off the sprite renderers, our debugging sprite renderers, real quick, so we can see what this looks like. Nice. This works though, see? Line renderer, tip, transform position, transform position. Yes. I know it took a while to get here, but there was really just some kind of mathematical error going on, because it really is just about that simple, right? Like, if you get rid of all this crap, it's really just the distance between these two things, and then you divide the distance over the initial sprite width, and that's your scale on the x-axis. So I mean, it's at its fundamental concept, it's actually pretty easy. I would argue at least as easy as the line renderer. I think I just made it harder on myself, but line renderer is probably made more so for that that particular use case. So I should probably not go against the grain and use what Unity wants me to use. Right. So now that we've actually gotten this far and we have the things positioned correctly, we can see that it's still a little bit off. So for this particular thing, yeah, I think that the vector 3 space, Salmon Moose says, keeping everything in vector 3 space helps a lot. I agree. That seemed to, once I just took another stab at it using the vector 3s, I think it was a combination of that and then just calculating the position from the position, not the local position. Because I'm using local position for a lot of the tweening and stuff, just so that everything is relative to each other. But for this particular instance, we don't really care about local position. All we really care about is the distance from one point to another, and that seems like it should work in local position too, right? Like if you've got two objects and you're calculating the distance between them, local position, that distance should be the same as world position. Maybe not. Maybe that was the issue. Maybe the issue is that trying to calculate the distance between those two things in local position is wrong, right? Because one of them is already offset from the parent, and the other one is lower. Oh, okay, I think that makes sense. I think that's the issue, actually. Because if you think about the tip of the tongue is at its apex like 4 units from the origin, right? But then if the local position of that is offset from its parent, which it was, that's why we're getting a little bit extra, right? And that would actually have been, that would have been a problem with the line renderer too, if I had been saying, if I'd been using the local positions to calculate the distance for the line renderer, that probably would have been an issue as well. So really, I think that the upshot is that when we're talking about distance between vectors, using local position is not the way to go. So that's what we've learned today. So far. It's been a painful lesson to learn. But I think that things are kind of looking like where we want them to be in that regard. So you probably have to remove these sprite renderers completely. Oops. Remove that component. Okay. And then we'll just take a look at this positioning stuff. Hey, Asura Light, thanks for joining. I'm not talking about collision detection. I'm talking about just calculating the distance between two objects in world space. I was trying to fix this bug with the tongue where the tongue, basically scaling it in between 2 points. Like it has a sprite render and I'm scaling it in between the end of the tongue and the beginning of the tongue. But when I was calculating that distance using the local positions of the game objects, then I was getting mathematically incorrect data. So when I switched to doing the world positions of those objects, calculating the distance between them, then that worked out just fine. which makes sense because of all the reasons that we talked about a minute ago. So now we can actually go back into these animations and we can kind of set this thing to be anchored right where we want. So we can kind of zoom in there and set the tongue to be like right about there. And click off that. So now let's see. That's looking pretty good. I think that we're definitely gonna have to do a little bit of work with how it overlaps the player character. Matt and I have been talking about ways to potentially like use multiple sprites to put his head, like if you have like a lower jaw and upper jaw or something. I kind of wanted to explore this method first just because it's more simple. And I think that with a couple tweaks here, we can make it look a little bit better. One, it looks like we could put it a little bit farther out from his face. So that's a little bit better. The other thing we probably want to do is like round off this sprite a little bit so that it doesn't look so like just completely cut off. Like just a little bit of rounding on it would look actually fine. The other thing is that there's a little bit of like a drift on the y-axis on the return, and I think it's because we haven't gone into the return function and actually set that up correctly. And again, this is actually a place where we should be calculating this distance just using the world positions probably. So we can say vector3.distance because really we want to know how far from the origin that it actually got. And so we can just say, tip.transform.position, and then this will be transform.position. And we can also just like not even allocate this stuff, which seems better. Yeah, so actually what we want to do is we want to tween that back towards 0, right? Actually, we don't want to use the local position that we want to use vector3.0. We just want to return it to its origin, which is going to be defined by where we put, where the animation puts the anchor. Yes, much better. We can also go back and change this timing so that it's not so slow. Oops. I have a bad habit of double clicking that thing. There we go. Hey, all right. Woo. So you can see we need to go through and make that correct for each of the animations. But now that we kind of have this, the fundamental case working, where like we can put it in a certain spot and it scales correctly, and we've broken it down to a couple sub objects for collision and stuff, we're in a pretty good spot there. And so probably not going to do the rest of that on stream just because it's going to be a bunch of going through each of these animations. And I'll do another one just to kind of show you what happened, but we would go back to like the tongue down animation and we would go kind of make sure that this is where we want it to be. And right now I'm just kind of eyeballing it. Shoop. So you can kind of see, it actually looks like this sprite, we could kind of use nudging it over just a hair, maybe like -0.1 on the x-axis. Let's see what that looks like, or 0.1. There you go, that's a little better. Nice. Anyways, I definitely like the sprites that Matt's drawn for this so far, so it's looking pretty good. And again, just got to go mirror that, because this direction looks bad because it's starting in the middle of his eyeball instead of in his mouth. But I really like that the Unity system kind of allows you to do like really fine-tuning stuff with the animations like that. Like typically, I always thought of the animations as kind of just controlling the visuals of the character, but it's nice to be able to tie collisions or sub-game objects to different positions on the sprite, especially in a game like this where we have these 8 directions. It just, it would be really tedious to have to manually specify where the tongue would start on all these different animations without having this kind of system where I can visually just kind of move it around. Bow to Me 26 says, how are you stretching the tongue? Is the tongue's image being stretched? Are you swapping between pics or what? The tongue's image is actually being stretched. So basically what it is just a child game object here with a sprite render. And what we do is we calculate the distance between the tip of the tongue and the base of the tongue, and then we use that distance over the sprite width to get a normal, and then we scale it based on that, just using local scale. I'm going to export this whole shebang to YouTube in the next couple days, and so you can actually watch and see how all of that works, because we actually spent quite a bit of time figuring out the scaling of that function again. Anyways, I think that's it for tonight, so thank you everybody for coming. It was fun. Hopefully we didn't spend too much time debugging those scaling issues. I'm stubborn. Maybe I should go take a look at Salmon Moose's line renderer, see if I can make that work. I should at least try it and see what the difference would look like. If it looks how I want it to look, then great. Otherwise, and it might be, maybe it's easier to have like a consistent base and a consistent tip with the line render in the middle. So maybe I'll give that a try. But I will report to you on those findings next week. Next Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific, we'll do another Wizards Lizard game development, Wizards Lizard 2, I'm sorry, game development live stream. Going to announce a Kickstarter pretty soon, so I hope you guys will all help us out there. Spread the word, back it if you can, and again, that's going to be coming pretty soon. And if you like what you see here, you can also check out a Wizards Lizard 1, which is on Steam right now, if you're into that kind of a thing. It's a very similar game, but Lizards 2 is going to be better in every single way. So thanks again for coming, and I will see you all next week. Ship it.